Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory and my co-presenter Ken is taking a well-earned break over the UK half-term academic holiday. However, I'm joined by Heather Price, Senior Counselling Professional at CPCAB, who is bringing us some breaking news. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Rory. Yeah, really exciting news that we're very pleased to let everybody know that we have at last launched our new Working with Children, Counselling Children and Young People Level 5 qualification. It's been in the making for the last 2 or 3 years, and at last we've got it out there.
Oh, that's just so exciting. And, you know, both you and myself have both taught. And one of the things that comes up through the years is that we get a lot of people wanting to work with children, and they want to do it during first trainings. Why is it important that someone who's thinking of working with children and adolescents have specific training?
Well, we think it needs time to develop. That probably the best way to approach it is for students to have a good grounding in a counselling qualification first, and then to think about how they might want to specialise. So it fits very well with our other level 5s like the CBT. So people have done their level 4, they want to specialise, they might want to work with children and young people because that's where they've had an interest. They might have done a bit of work with children and young people on their level 4 and then wanted to develop that. And it's very important that they get a qualification, because working with children and young people is quite specialised and can be quite tricky, thinking of things like confidentiality, consent, all those sorts of areas, which are a little bit different perhaps than the usual counselling training, and people do need to have that knowledge, those skills and that specialist training.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And as someone who was a school counsellor for 7 years, who did a child and adolescent therapy course, I was so grateful of it in service of my clients, because I learned so much. And in my conversations through the years with people who've wanted to work with children, that's a great thing. I've always said, you need specific training, and that kind of brings me to the next point. When we're talking about children and adolescents, what age ranges are we discussing here?
Well, our qualification is for working with 11 to 18-year-olds. And we kept it to that age range because we think that younger than 11, generally, it's a different type of counselling. It's more to do with play therapy than perhaps therapeutic work. And that's perhaps making a very broad distinction. And obviously there are differences and children will be different. But we felt the 11 to 18 age group fitted more in with our other qualifications and our student base and the area that people would want to work with. So it's 11 to 18.
Yes, and that's a distinction at least one ethical body make, isn't it? I believe the BACP have made a distinction between small children and 11 to 18-year-olds.
Yes, and they've got a set of competencies now for working with children and young people, and have got specific competencies for those two different age ranges. And NCS have also got a set of competencies, and we've ensured that our qualification is mapped to both of those sets of competencies.
Oh, that was going to be my next question. Are they mapped to the competencies?
Yeah,
because more and more training is now being mapped to ethical competencies from a number of ethical bodies, and we've mentioned the BACP and the NCS. Yeah. One of the things that I've always believed is crucially important when we're speaking about working with anybody, but especially working with children, is your own personal therapy. I believe there is a requirement for your own personal therapy when you undertake this qualification.
Yes, there is. We've put in a requirement for 20 hours of personal therapy during this course. We do think, and I know myself from having worked with children and young people, that sometimes your own childhood stuff can be triggered. And it's really important to go to your own therapy to look at those areas, which could cause you some difficulties or maybe even stop you counselling. So although 20 hours might seem a little bit high for a level 5, we do think that that's really important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And through the years, obviously you've taught yourself. I've always been crucially aware that some students come to counselling training, because they've had difficult childhoods themselves, and working with children. And one of the things we know is that people present in therapy sometimes when their children are at the age when they were having very difficulties in their life, and it's kind of a transferential thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all sorts of stuff can be quite unexpectedly triggered, even though people think, oh yeah, I'm fairly well sorted, and I've come to terms with things that happened in my childhood or whatever. Then something can happen on a course like this where it all gets reactivated. So it's really important to have a place to go with that. Go to personal therapy.
Absolutely, and I think it's something that certainly it benefited me when I did my therapy. How much of my life was formulated in childhood? Not something that's unusual, because it's a very formative stage in one's life, isn't it? So
absolutely.
So thinking about working with children, where could somebody work with children? What kind of locations or places would someone undertaking this course look for or go to?
Well, a number of places, I guess. I mean, you mentioned being a school counsellor, and that would perhaps be one of the most obvious, a school or college counsellor working with young people. It might be an agency which specialises in the younger age group, and there are those agencies around. At this level, at level 5, it could be a private or independent counsellor working for an external organisation, like a school, youth club, a wellness setting, mental health setting, those kinds of areas. It could be somebody who is already an adult counsellor, let's say, who wants to extend their work so that they can now work with children and young people. Could be somebody like a youth worker in the community, or maybe an outreach worker with teenagers, with adolescents, let's say. So a number of areas really where there are children and young people and teenagers that people could go into.
Yes, and so there's a wide range of entry here. One of the things I think that we need to be clear on is this is a specialist qualification. It's not a first training, is it? So people who take this course will not become counsellors per se. They're already qualified counsellors.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So we don't want to mislead people. Not that we are, but people can't just sign up for this and become a counsellor and a child counsellor.
No, exactly. Our entry requirement for this level 5 is someone who's done either CPCAB's level 4 or the equivalent of that, which is 420 guided learning hours, with a client work element of 100 supervised client hours. So that's kind of like the baseline. So anything equivalent to that, we would look at as an entry into this new level 5. So you're right, they're already qualified counsellors. They've done their basic training, if you like, and now want to specialise in working with younger people.
Yes, I mean, I think that's really, really, really important. There's so much confusion around qualifications. We get a lot of letters in the mailbag about qualifications in the absence of regulation. That it has to be said that CPCAB offer high quality qualifications that are regulated.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a regulated qualification. And it might be worth just saying at this point that we do have a number of what we call tailor-made courses, which are bespoke qualifications, which are unique to each centre that has produced them. And they are accredited by us, but they're not regulated. And I know that's quite difficult for people to get a handle on sometimes, but they're not on the regulated framework, so they don't attract funding, but they are owned by the individual centres. So CPCAB doesn't share those with anybody else, whereas this new one, it is a regulated qualification. It does attract funding, and we share it. It's open to everybody. It's there on our website. Anybody can pick it up and use it, providing they meet our approval procedures.
Yeah, I mean, this is really important, isn't it? Because qualifications, certainly in the UK, are regulated, and there's different regulating bodies in different principalities. So, Scotland has their own regulatory body, as does Wales, as does Northern Ireland. But they all fall broadly under the same framework. Sometimes we use the word Ofqual, which is actually the English qualification. But that means that somebody outside your organisation has looked at them and seen that they're fit for purpose.
Yeah, exactly. So they've approved them and they've put them on the framework, the national framework, of the different countries. Yeah.
Oh, so in different countries, so different countries could use them?
Oh, well, I was meaning like Scotland and Ireland and Wales. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned funding. It's always a expensive endeavour, I think, to study any kind of counselling, sadly. Yeah. So when you say they're funded, what does that mean?
So it means that the qualification and the students taking the qualification are eligible for funding. So that because the qualification has gone on to the regulatory framework and has been passed by the funding association, ESFA, then it means that the qualification itself is eligible for advanced learning loans. I think that depends on whether the students themselves are eligible, but the qualification is now eligible for that funding if there is that funding around.
Yes, and so if a college were to run it, or a university, maybe a university department, they may very well be able to draw down funding, which effectively means you don't, as a student, you don't have to pay up front. You just get a loan and then you have to pay the loan back. Yes. Yeah. It's a level 5 qualification, and in our little preamble before we press the record button, you did allude to the fact that there's a connection with the Open University.
Yes, that's right. We're really excited about that. As lots of listeners will know, we've got a partnership with the Open University for the foundation degree, and students have to have done our level 4, the TCL4, and then one of our level 5s or a number of OU modules. And so the OU has accepted this new level 5 as one of the qualifications on that pathway. So at the moment, we've got the CBT and the PCL5, and the children's qualification is being added to it. So we're really excited about that.
So what does that mean in terms of someone doing an OU course? Does that mean that their modules are automatically accredited and they would only have to do so many other modules to go for a degree? Is that how it works?
It's a little bit more complicated than that. They have to register their interest with the OU foundation degree if that's what they want to do. And students generally, I think, perhaps start doing that when they're doing their level 4, because they can, if they want to, start doing some of the OU modules while they're still doing their level 4 if they've got time. And others wait until they've done their level 4 and then think, now, am I going to do a level 5 qualification with CPCAB, or am I going to do a number of modules, or a mix of both?
It sounds very, very comprehensive. Like you say, it's not straightforward, but it does sound incredibly comprehensive, as we would expect from.
I think it's good for people who want to learn at home, and we've all got much more used to working online and learning from home over the last year or so. So whereas previously it was kind of like, oh, well, I don't really want to do that, I'd rather stay in my college. Well, perhaps now it's become more the norm. So it would be a nice mixture. People could do our level 4, they could do one of the level 5s, the children's one being one of them, and then a number of OU modules, which are mostly online, to get their foundation degree.
Well, it sounds like a very comprehensive training, as we'd expect from CPCAB. We'll put a link to the training in the show notes. If you go to Counselling Tutor, click the podcast tab and look down, it'll be a CPCAB special edition, and you'll be able to click on the link and go to CPCAB's website and have a look at the qualification yourself. One final question before we end, Heather, is how many guided learning hours is this qualification?
It's 120, which means that we would be expecting it to be run over 1 year. So it's the same as the other level 5s. So it could be, like a day a week throughout the year, or I know with the higher qualifications, some people like to offer them as perhaps a 2-day block once a month, something like that, 2 or 3 days or 2.5 days, whatever. So we would expect it to be done in a year.
So there's a huge amount of flexibility in this. You could do a weekend block if you're a training provider, or do 2 days. There's quite a lot of flexibility. Yeah. But interestingly enough, CPCAB have embraced the new forms of learning, and part of this can be delivered online.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Slightly strange figures, but 49% of the course, that's of those 120 hours, can be delivered online, and then 51% in the classroom. So it's more or less 50-50, and as an easy way of remembering it.
Yeah, so it's a real blended learning, and of course it links in with CPCAB's endeavours to bring counselling training into the new world. Online training has become a thing. Well, it's always lovely talking to Heather. So Heather Price, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rory.
So a big thank you to Heather Price for sharing that information with us. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.